To begin, we simply right-click and select New Report Type. And we give the report type a name. Notice the free disk space ratio. This is for the report processor. What this is telling you is that when you're extracting this information, you'll need up to twice the amount of available, or you'll need available twice the amount of the, or the size of the incoming file. So if you drop a gig, you could take up to 2 gig because of all the temporary files that get generated during processing. That can be a significant amount of space. We're going to change the source to PDF, and we'll select our sample file. Now I copy the samples to my Ermex directory into a sample folder, so I kind of keep everything organized. And I actually talk about that in the lab. That's probably a good practice. And then I select my data source and my application. We have various options available for report processing. I'm not going to go through all of these. I will mention that group pages by index allows us to combine pages with like index values into a single logical document. The next one, enable report view, is a cool feature which allows us to go back and look at the original report more or less in its original format. There are some exceptions to that I'm not going to go into, but we'll take a look at the result of that. It allows us to perform a different kind of query in the application extender system. The last one I'll talk about is the AX index key reference update. This is a nice feature. It allows us to extract information from the report and then update the AE_RF table so that we can go back later and use that information, perhaps for some regular document imaging type indexing. We'll go in and move on into our next page here, where we get to select the compression method. This frame is lit up if we're using ASCII, because we can compress ASCII. The reason it's grayed out here is because we're using PDF, and there's really nothing we can do on the compression side with the PDF file. It's already compressed. We can choose what is known as the maximum chunk size, which means if we dropped a very large file, we would basically break it up into individual bins, each weighing 1,024 kilobytes. We can choose to store the documents individually or as a report file. One of the questions I had up there in the scoping section was, what is the document retention policy for these reports? And that's an important question, not just because we need to know what the retention policy is, but for document storage, we need to store individual files if we intend to have any sort of records management policy. Reason being, we may need to purge a particular file, and we're unable to do so if they're chunked and combined with other report files. So if you're using, or you have a retention policy, you probably want to select individual. That, of course, would create a bin for each doc. Moving right along, you can see the processing time limit. We allow for up to 30 minutes, or the entire process fails. It'll retry 3 times, and it'll do so every 5 minutes. After completion or failure, by default, you can see that we're going to clean the files up, but we'll keep them for up to 72 hours, which is nice if we need to go back and do some troubleshooting. We have the ability to resubmit the report right within the interface, and it's good to have those files on hand. Finally, you have the report error script. We have some canned scripts that, if you're not, very savvy, if you're like me, and not very good at programming and the like, I have some canned reports here under the reports management folder. There's some report error script samples. So you could send the error report to a database or to an email, or you could write it to an error log. You simply have to open up the VBS file with like Notepad and configure the appropriate SMTP servers or log files. So that'll give you a good head start. I would argue you almost always want to have some kind of report error script, fire in the event of a problem. finally, we have configuration available for the BI gateway. That's the big engine. This allows data export to an ASCII file. We can also launch a script which would reformat the data in XML. Again, we don't use that very often. Customers have other ways of getting at the data, especially if it's coming out of their own system. That may not be the case if the data is coming from an external source. So that may be the thing to look for. If the data is coming from a partner, maybe the BI gateway is a great tool to mine information out of a report that's coming into the organization. And with that, I'm going to take the phone off mute and ask if we have any questions.
The conference is now in talk mode.
Okay, you should be able to ask questions if you have any.
No, this is pretty good. This is fine. This is sort of takes me back to the old computer output microfiche days. Generation. A whole lot more fancy, but yeah, it's some of the same techniques.
Yeah, but without all that smell of the fixer and the other chemicals.
Yes.
Just the microfilm. So, looking at what we do next, we need to create what's called a procedure, and you can see under this tree here, we have the report view, which would basically display the water bill. We have procedures and we have data fields. So here's the fields that we have from our AX application. And then in this section here, we can create new procedures. We can even add scripts. But I'm going to create a new procedure, and it's a very simple language, which is good. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to demonstrate this to you guys because of my skills. And by the way, we have an online reference called XDS reference. You can go right in and see what's involved with creating these. But the exercise actually steps you through the various step by step when to do different commands. It's extremely simple. But in this case, I'm starting with the page proc instruction. So I'm basically saying this is a page level extract. And if you look back at the report, that makes sense because on each page, I have some values that are occurring. This almost tells you at what level the extraction logic is going to fire. So at the page level, it's going to go to different lines and columns and extract information. We have another kind of procedure, and that's called a line procedure. And that's a little different because it executes your logic on every line. So, for example, if I wanted to grab this stuff, billing date, I would not create a page proc because, consider that there could be multiple billing dates on here, perhaps. An invoice example would have been better to bring up here where you have multiple line items on the invoice. The technique we would use is to first create a line procedure. So we'd have a line proc. So we're telling the system to execute on every line. And then we would tell the system to look for a certain pattern, such as this date pattern. So we'd look for numerics with a slash. And if you were to look at the engine as it processed, and then we'll take a look at how this thing operates a little bit more in detail in a second. But we're going to tell it to go to column, say that's 20, and look for this pattern on every line. And if it matches, extract this field and the meter number and the service, whatever we need off this line. But that's the technique, and that's a line procedure. It's different than a page procedure where we know we're just going to sort of overlay the entire page. Now, if we're firing the line procedure on every line, consider our processing is going to start all the way up in the upper left-hand corner of the report. Consider it coordinate 0, 0. And given the logic that I stated earlier, we're going to go to line 20 and look for the pattern, which on this line 0 or line 1, whatever that is, it's going to fail. then it's going to go on to the next line, and then the next line, and then the next line, and it's going to continue down until it hits line number 50 or whatever this is, and it says, oh, I have the pattern. I can now extract this data. And if there was another line with the billing date right under, it would find it and extract that information. The result of this is multiple documents in the AX system. It is something I try to stay away from, but it's certainly available, and it's something you guys can take advantage of if you need it. Any questions on that? I know I went through a lot there with the line procedure, but until you start doing them, it's sort of a difficult concept. How are you doing, Friedman? My friend?
Sorry, it was on mute. Yeah, this is fine. I understand this concept. My machines used to do phone bills.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I'm not afraid to tell you guys, when I started with Mac and imaging 11 years ago, it took me about a year to understand what a cold product actually did. And I think when Ed took me into a room and showed me a green bar printer, and he said, we make that go away, then I finally got it. And, I've been working with the product ever since. And, it's definitely one of the more fun tools you'll get to use in the EMC ApplicationXtender suite. So, once that's done, you declare a page procedure. You're going to go in and extract from the text layer of the PDF. Now, this looks drastically different, obviously, than this. This is a formatted PDF, but hidden beneath the PDF is a text layer. We can adjust the line scale to get, and we have different view algorithms we can adjust, which in the lab, you'll have to do that to display the report properly. And you just have to experiment when you get a new report to come up with the right values. You can see the information that we want to extract. This is off the text layer, though, of the actual PDF file. And that's what we need to use to build out our coordinates and everything else. Now, at this point, we can choose to extract the data right here, or we could write some code and pull down some instructions and things like that. Those of you that know me well know that I'm very lazy, so I'm just going to extract the field right from here. And you can see it gives me a drop down. It suggests a variable name, and it actually builds a little block of code for me. Let's look at that. Just by highlighting that and clicking extract field, it told the system to go to line 7, column 147, extract 15 characters, and store it into a temporary holding place called varserv address. And then store that variable later to a field called service address, which is what we set up in the AX application. So it's really that simple. Now, let me ask you guys, just based on what I have up here on the screen, these 4 lines, looking at line number 3, so I'll give you a hint. Does anybody see a problem with line number 3?